All right, let's turn to the next one here. I wanted to get something in the show that was interesting. And, this is some fascinating data, Krystal, that you highlighted on top of a new study that's come out. We love to track domestic migration here. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. So latest data that's come out from the US Census shows that record wave of Americans fled big cities, not for other big cities, but for small ones. Remote work in particular has led to a, quote, small town boom, and migration to areas under 250,000 people has topped all locations. That's actually crazy because we're talking about mid-size and smaller tier cities. So they highlight a few of them in the report, but really if you look at the overall trend line, it's absolutely fascinating. So let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. I encourage everybody to go read this, by the way. It's from the University of Virginia's Domestic Demographics Research Group, and they've done a really good job here. What you see in front of you is U.S. rural county annual domestic migration. And basically what you can see is that from 2000 to basically, what is that, 2020, it is net loss. And in some cases, significant net loss.
Yeah.
A lot of this has to do with NAFTA, with the consolidation, the decline of the American farm. You can also see how 2008 definitely accelerated a lot of those trends as well, because a lot of those people went bankrupt and they were forced to leave their property. But then all of a sudden, 2019 and 2020, massive spike of net migration, increased net migration to rural counties, over 100,000 people. And the fascinating part is it's stayed up. It's dropped a little bit, but it's way, way above the overall trend line. If we go to the next part here, you can actually see too how this is a complete reverse. If we go to the next slide, please, guys, which is annual domestic migration with over 1 million residents, you see the same thing where annual domestic migration in U.S. counties with over 1 million, they've been losing, for a little while, but, relatively going down. Some people were moving, but they're moving to bigger cities, or 250,000 to 1 million. But here, same thing. You just see a massive drop of over 1 million people there from 2020 to 2021. And it continues in the 800,000. So no real sign that things are changing. And in fact, I think what the pandemic did is it just shook things up significantly for a lot of people. And that shakeup has changed in combination with work conditions where they're willing to move to more rural areas. They highlight one town in here, Krystal, that you may be able to speak to, which previously it's like this tiny town, previously known as the sweatshirt capital of Virginia. And now they have the highest wage growth in the state, and they're getting their own Starbucks, which is crazy, apparently, for them. So, by the way, I wouldn't want Starbucks right now.
We got our Starbucks in King George County a few years back, and it was very
Was it big?
It was a big deal. It's still a big deal that it's there.
That's where all the ladies meet, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is so looking at the trends, this trend actually began before COVID, but like many other things, COVID accelerated it. And so since you had the uptake and the normalization of remote work, or at least like hybrid work models, that really fueled and accelerated this trend. And one of the questions was, okay, well, was this just like a COVID era thing? Or is this a persistent change in American migration and, living choices? And what's really noteworthy now is that it clearly is a persistent change. So in the early part of my, professional life, it was very much the total opposite of this. So we had these rise of these superstar mega cities, the DC, New York, San Francisco, LA, et cetera. And they're just, sucking up all the population. And rural counties in particular were really struggling because young people they would grow up there and they would leave, and no one was coming in to replace them. With trade policy that, sucked the industry out of many of these towns, it looked really dire for almost all of rural America. It looked extremely dire in terms of what the future was. You can go to these towns and you can see what they used to be. And you can see how they're struggling to just, maintain the roads and fill the potholes and keep the school together, et cetera, because of the loss of population, the loss of tax revenue. So now we're seeing a total reversal of that dynamic where you now have it's the cities that are going to struggle with this problem. We've talked about this ties in with the commercial real estate bust, which still looms as a major economic issue, overhang. Actually, I just saw this Holiday Inn that's like a block from where we are right now that just sold for less than the debt that's owed on.
Wow.
Like, yes, I mean, it's crazy. If anyone wants a good deal on a Holiday Inn, I guess there's one just around the corner here that was for sale. But in any case, these large urban centers are going to have a major challenge on their hands to keep their vitality, because when you have population decline, then you have vacancies, then it's a spiral effect in terms of the local businesses, the small businesses, the lunch places, the hotels, et cetera, and it can be very difficult to reverse that decline. Now, I mean, we've had previous cycles like this in America, after like the 1968 and the race riots, et cetera, you had this white flight out of cities that portended a real era of decline in a lot of large megacities in America as well. And then that changed around. So it's not like this is permanent and it's the end of everything, but it is really significant. It could also have some political implications too, because one of the challenges for Democrats in terms of the House of Representatives is that their voters tended to be super concentrated in these cities in a way that was not advantageous for them in terms of the congressional district split. So you have Democrats sort of like spread out a bit more across the suburban landscape, the small city landscape, the rural landscape. It could ultimately lead to some political implications here as well. But I guess, Saagar, my big takeaway is those cities may be thankful for these Republican governors busing migrants in. They may need that new blood. They may need that increase in population.
I don't think
they're be thankful for it.
Well, they won't be thankful for it because they're going to be on the dole for the rest of the time that they're there. But
these are hard-working people.
Well, not for now.
Give them work permits and they'll be good to go.
Maybe. We'll see. But my point would just be, if I would be very worried, like you said, if I were Republicans, because you've now become so attractive that a lot of people who don't agree with you really at all are now moving into your state to take advantage. They may agree with you necessarily on on tax policy or whatever, but not on abortion. We're already watching this play out in the state of Now, I'm not saying that these states are going to go blue. What I am saying is that the changes in their coalition is significantly different and will change what the future politics of the state look like, especially as these people amass wealth and power, and especially because a lot of these people have money. And you're already watching it happen right now in Austin. I mean, Austin politics has changed dramatically just in my lifetime from the Texas that I grew up in. I'm hearing the same thing out of Houston and out of Dallas. The spread that is happening also. I mean, Texas is the biggest booming state in the country. Tiny little counties, which previously, you just drive through, are some of the fastest growing areas in the United States. I'm watching the same thing happen in states like Arizona, where Phoenix, is one of the biggest boom towns in the U.S. Well, that's no coincidence that Maricopa County went blue for Biden for the very first time. It's only more likely, especially with things like abortion, to be on the ballot. I wouldn't sleep on Idaho either, from what I understand and everything I've read. Boise is a similar boom. Didn't think I'd ever say that in my life. Boom town, Boise, Idaho, for real estate prices and from a lot of Californians. I think the same is true, I believe, of the state of North Carolina, Charlotte. There's a significant real estate boom that's happening there. I think Charleston, South Carolina, seeing similar things. And of course, Atlanta, Georgia, and the changing demographics. So the politics of all of this can change significantly, both at the electoral college level and in terms of just gerrymandering and the way that we think about this. But overall, this is a very net positive, in my opinion. I think mass consolidation was a real cultural detriment to the U.S. because basically you got to places where, and even I've moved away from Washington, D.C. Moving from a place which is 98% blue to 70% blue is actually different. It just in terms of the people you're around, and then I can't even imagine what it would be like to live from 90% blue to 50-50. I know you live somewhere in a different area, but I'm sure you see that as well. For cultural mixing and just the type of people you're exposed to, it's good. It's important to be around people who you don't necessarily agree with or who are just very different from you at all times.
Where I live is, I think it's about 60-40, went for Trump, 60-40. So it's definitely a conservative area is where I grew up. So it's very, it's what I'm used to. I'm very comfortable there. I agree with you that it could be a very hopeful story. because there was this previous dynamic. There was a book written by Bill Bishop, The Big Sword.
Oh, yeah.
That really dug into how like-minded people were clustering in the same places. And so you could go through your life and not have to, be at a school board or PTA meeting with people who had different views for you, or going to get your coffee at Starbucks with people who are different. Like, you could live in a total and complete bubble. And guess what? Human beings, being the tribal creatures that they are, when you're in that bubble and you don't have to be exposed to people with different views, you can very easily demonize them. You can think of them as monsters. You can think of them as enemies versus just like, complex human beings who happen to have come to a different place and different conclusions or had a different cultural upbringing than you did. So if this leads to more cultural sorting, we have all this discourse about, we're on the brink of civil war and we're going to tear each other apart. And part of that true polarization and sense that I think is real of the country being divided in these, very stark ways is the fact that we have had so much cultural sorting into these various bubbles. And so if this reverses that a little bit, I think it will be good. I think it will be healthy for the country. I think it is much better when you have a mix of people of different, races, socioeconomic backgrounds, political views, who all have to interact with each other, because it really is an antidote to the easy demonization of people who are quote unquote different in whatever way. Yes. And in a way that, Matt Taibbi really tracked this quite well in his Hating book, in a way that has been, that division is very profitable for cable news industry, who can just pick out one random person and, use them to say, this is what everybody who disagrees with you has these terrible views and they're these terrible people, or they're evil, they're the biggest threat to the country, et cetera. That becomes very powerful if you don't know those people personally. You have no experience with what they're actually all about and what they're actually like. I mean, it's part of the core foundation of this show and why we do what we do. So maybe, possibly, it could be a very hopeful trend. And I, being a pro small town rural person, I like to see that there is life being injected back into these communities. I think there's something, precious and special there that's worth rescuing.
It's good for America. America's built on that. Coming Apart by Charles Murray, same book, same thing. I highly recommend it.
That one's a little more controversial.
No. Charles Murray's controversial for separate things that he wrote, not for Coming Apart.
Coming Apart is one of Joe Biden's favorite books.
I know.
Did you know that?
That's why I was. You should. It doesn't show in some of his politics, but I guess we can take it. So I recommend the book. Don't read the race and IQ stuff if you don't want to, which is in separate books, but separate conversation. We got a great guest standing by, the UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese. Let's get to it.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.